Hey, good evening and welcome to another Friday Night Fire. It's good to see you here tonight. For those of you that are joining us live, thank you so much. I got my buddy Matt. He is getting all green screened up. And Matt, you ready? You good? Give me a thumbs up. Rock.
Be a little wonky.
The green, little wonky.
It's not perfectly green. Yes. Oh, you know what? That's true because I zoomed it in and you zoomed it in, and now I've got a halo light. So
you're magical. You should be doing your makeup right now.
If I did makeup.
So, hey, for those of you that are joining us for Friday Night Fire, as you know, we do motivation, inspiration, a little faith-based foundation, and a lot of conversation between my good buddy over here on my left, Mr. Matt Koenig, and myself, Mike Phillips. So we're going to get into some Friday Night Fire tonight. Matt, how you feeling tonight, man? You got your green screen set up?
I'm feeling good. I'd be feeling better if I could actually get it to work as well as it has this week during some recordings that I've done. But you know what? It's going to be a great show.
Absolutely is. So tonight we're going to be picking up, it's a brick screen. Hey, good evening, Kevin Campbell in the house. So tonight we're picking up, we talked last week about having a conversation on the very key phrase in the Bible that's Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22, right? I think is where it starts.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to sing the whole show. Is that, we're not really going to sing the whole
feel show. Like we could. It would, listen, sometimes it'll sound good. Sometimes it won't. It's okay.
You never know. So the Ephesians 5:22 says, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. And so we brought this up last week, and we said, hey, we're going to get into having this conversation. And it could be a little touchy, it could be a little bit iffy, because right away, submission in marriage, as you saw our thumbnail shows here, it says submission is not a four-letter word. Like, Matt, when we first started talking about this last week, you said, hey, look, when somebody says submission or somebody's got to submit to someone, they think of two things. And what was that you were talking to me about?
What I love is that you put that right to me because you didn't want to say those two. So, here's what it's either people either think of, like somebody being weak, right? Like overpowered, or they think like 50 Shades of Grey, right? Like that's when they hear the word submission, that's the two directions people go. It's like, you're submitting to somebody who's overpowering you because they're lording it over you, or it's some, or it's, sexy time stuff. In a promoted in the world kind of way,
Right. And we even struggled with that as we were getting into this, for the thumbnail, when we were saying submission, do we go a little bit racy? And here's the irony. I'm going to share this with everybody that's watching also. When we were talking about it, because we had what I would consider racy image. You probably would. Most of our viewers probably would. And we thought, well, we could tone it down and cover it with some type and so forth. And we ran it through Google, and Google said, yeah, that's too racy. Don't use that. Right.
Oh, so that's what they said. I thought it was the other way, and that Google said that one scored higher.
Well, it scored higher as far as being racy. I like higher than it should.
Risk-wise higher.
Right, risk-wise.
Okay.
So I said, okay, we don't know if we want to use that one. So we found the image, for those of you that have been following us all week, the image of the kind of the husbands and wives' hands over one another with the wedding ring there, if I do it that way, kind of the wedding ring. Google said that was even more racy. It was like, oh no, don't use that. And it makes
that was so sense. Weird.
It's so weird.
For them to say that was racy. Like that was a trip to me. Like when you brought that up, I'm like, I can't see the husband-wife wedding rings together as racy.
But okay. I almost think, and this is assumption on my part, but I almost think it's because we're saying submission in the title, and then it's looking at it as the husband and wife wedding ring, and Google's like, oh, they're going to talk about something bad. And because in general, like when society hears that, Matt said we kind of think of two things. Wives, submit to your husbands, especially, oftentimes women raise up their hands, or people in general will raise up their hands and say, well, that's demeaning, right? That's demeaning that you would be talking about submitting to another person. And so what we wanted to do, the direction we would really like to head tonight is, what's the biblical meaning behind the statement of wives submit to your husbands? And then with that, maybe we can have some really good dialogue and conversation, as well as changing some people's perceptions. Because as I was doing research, there's a lot of things that it came up, and it was like, no, that's not the right thing.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because we started on Ephesians 5:22, but I'm just going to I'm pulling up my Bible right here. But I think the reason a lot of times too this gets taken out of context is because people, they start reading it out of context. They start reading in the wrong place, and oftentimes it's taught from the wrong place. Like, this is like what we talked about before, right? People tend to play pick a verse, right? Like, I want my wife to listen to me and let me make the rules. So, hey, Ephesians 5:22, babe. Wives submit to your husband.
Go review
right?
it.
Yeah, and it's like Kevin said, sometimes a wife doesn't need to submit because she needs to overrule the man from bad decisions. Well, and therein lies, what does submission mean to you? Like, what does that mean? And I want to start by pointing people to Ephesians 5:21.
Yep. Here we
and
go.
Further, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So as people are going, oh, this is all about, wives submit. And it's like, no. It starts with, hey, you, followers of Jesus, you need to be willing to submit to one another. Meaning, listen to one another, follow understand that everybody here is trying to better one another. Like the starting on verse 5:22 is the perfect example of what drives non-believers and believers crazy, which is taking Bible verses and trying to make them what we want versus what the context of the scripture is pointing to. And people also tend to leave out verses 25 through 30,
right?
Which are also important. So, yeah, I mean, now listen, the submission does mean what people think, though. I mean, that's one of the meanings, and that's the challenge. The challenge that gets wrestled, because submission does have more than one meaning. It does also mean, if you've ever done, like I did judo, and I did jujitsu for a little while, but I'm not that tough. But I did judo for a while. And you know what? When somebody locks your arm in an arm bar and it feels like it's going to get snapped in half, you submit, you tap. You're like, all right, I'm done, right? Like, that's submitting to someone who's doing something more powerful than you. So yes, there are instances where the word submit means you are submitting to someone who is more powerful, and they're taking that, and you're submitting to that, right?
But it says, wives, do this as you would to Christ, right? As you would to God. And so Dimoplane Grader says, how do they define submit in the Bible? Well, here's the thing. First off, the Bible is not Merriam-Webster, right? So, right. Like Matt was saying, you have to look at, oftentimes you have to look at the entire chapter rather than just pick a verse. And so when you look at the entire portion of Ephesians, when you're looking in Ephesians 5, as we're talking and we're focused on this one right now, this area right now, it's talking about living by the Spirit's power. It's talking about Spirit-guided relationships. It is not just talking about submission. So it's talking about the whole relationship, right? First, submit to one another. Wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wife as you love yourself, as you love me. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the verse up in front of me specifically. I know it fairly well. And so when it's talking about submission also, and it's saying submit to one another, it's talking about a level of respect. What it is not talking about, let's talk about what it's not meaning. It's not servanthood. It's not being inferior. It's not being docile or just being a yes person.
I'm going to push back on one of the words you just said. It's not.
Okay.
And that's servanthood. I agree with you. It's not being docile and being a yes person, but we're all called to serve.
Here we go. Now we're 4 weeks in. Now we're.
Yes, 4 weeks in. Now it's a battle. Now it's like the Joe Rogan show. No, but I mean, we are called to serve one another. And I think we have to change the mindset of what it means to be a servant, because culturally we think servant means slave, butler, maid, right? And so we look at servant as a negative word often, but biblically Jesus washed their feet, right? Jesus said,
Sure.
I'm gonna serve you. Like, that was the ultimate example. Him dying on the cross was an example of servanthood. So that's the only word I push back on.
And that's fair. I respect that. The thing is, when we're looking at servant, I think there is a difference between serving someone and servanthood, or being a servant, where it's viewed in that negative context.
Yeah, so, like you're in servitude because you owe a debt and now you have to be a servant kind of deal.
Right. So Weldon says, hey, good evening, Weldon, by the way. He says, I'm going to have to catch the replay. Wife went to Wednesday night ladies group, and this was a discussion one night. Yeah, I'd love for you to catch the replay. I'd love to have more discussion with you, Weldon. I love that you show up for these all the time.
Heck yeah.
So as we're talking about this, one of the things, to have the humility to submit to another person, also keep in mind that takes a lot of strength of character. It takes a lot of confidence and a lot of humility and a genuine trust for one another as well. And so, what was said here, there's submit has layers beyond the physical. Again, when we started this, and I know we kind of, with the thumbnail and what we were talking about last week, and I know both of us even had conversations about, hey, let's have our wives on, because I'd love to get their perspective.
That went over like a lead balloon.
My wife did not submit. She said, she said hard pass, right? But we had that conversation because we're here. We are two white male Christians talking about, well, what does it mean for the wife to submit to the husband? Kevin Campbell says it takes love, and absolutely. And so what happens is, as I was saying there a moment ago, is it takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of humility. It takes a lot of character. In a marriage, for the wife to submit to the husband, it takes an attitude of helpfulness, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like, she wants to help and support, but by doing that, it provides a content and a peaceful and a happy marriage. I mean, there is, and I'm not trying to get into the political side of the discussion, but there is a difference in needs between men and women. There's a difference in needs between male and female. Whether you want to call it male and female energy, male and female, that's not a discussion necessarily we want to get into having tonight. But it's, it is one that when each person, I guess, plays their role, so to speak. And stop me anytime if I'm getting off track here. But as each person is playing that role, and if you're following biblically what this conversation, or where this conversation is taking us, then it is one that promotes a healthy and happy relationship.
Well, and that, I think you hit the word. So Eugene Peterson is, a very well-known biblical scholar. He created the Message paraphrase to put the Bible into readable language. And so Clinton asked, maybe you could break down the word. And I want to share, because I read the NLT is like my study Bible. Mm-hmm. But then
Me too.
I utilize the Message as am I really putting it in the right context? And so I look at how is it blocked into groups of sentences, and what's the context of the way it's described. And in Ephesians, before verse 21, it's headlined relationships. And Clinton says, can you break down what it means? So I want to tell you, as we read, for example, the New Living Translation, that says, and further, verse 21, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Verse 22, for wives, this means submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Now, let me tell you, verses 20 through to 24 should be grouped together. So let me read 23 and 24. 23, yeah, for a husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of the church. He is the Savior of his body, the church, meaning Christ is, obviously. As the church submits to Christ, so you wives should submit to your husbands and everything. Now, in the Message, let me read how it's worded. Out of respect for Christ, verse 21, be courteously reverent to one another. Okay? So boom, for the sake of Jesus, right? So where it says submit to one another, this says be courteously reverent to one another. And then verses 20 through to 24 go on to say, wives, understand and support your husband in ways that show your support for Christ. Interestingly enough, it's really about serving Jesus in our behavior to the one we love, right? Because biblically, there's no stronger bond than the marriage relationship. It even says further, because of this, a husband will leave his family, right? He'll leave behind his mother and father to be with his wife. So anyways, it says, wives, understand and support your husbands in ways that show your support for Christ. The husband provides leadership to his wife the way Christ does to the church, not by domineering. Let me say that again. Not by domineering, but by cherishing. So just as this church submits to Christ as he exercises such leadership, wives should likewise submit to their husbands. So the way he paraphrases this, he's saying, look, because your husband is loving and basically putting you before everything, because to say like Christ, Christ did for his church in leadership, what did Christ do? He went to the cross. He said, I love you so much. I'm going to reconcile you to my Father, and I'm going to sacrifice everything I am and everything I have so that you can be redeemed with my Father. And so the Message paraphrase, I think, hits it on the head better than any other translation in saying the way the husband provides leadership to his wife, the way Christ does the church, means if you're leading correctly as a husband, you're putting your wife first. You're saying, I'll lay down my life for you. You're saying, you're the most important human being on this planet to me, and I want to serve you with my life. And that's where I think a lot of people get lost when they read the verse, because they don't read and understand the context, because in order to understand the context, you got to understand what Jesus did for us.
Well, and I'm just going to pause for a minute. Like, I think we could end the show right there tonight. Thanks for joining us for a 20-minute Friday Night Fire, guys. Hope it was good for you. No, I mean, that's such a good... I like how you said, hey, I use the NLT as my study Bible. I use the Message to go back as you're looking at the meaning and context and so forth. I think it's awesome. The fact is, there are roles and rules that we both play. And like we said a minute ago, as Clinton was bringing up, and as you just said here, it's reverence for both parties, for both people, to be able to take care of people. And I'm going to adjust this here. There we go. I like that, Jam. Yeah.
So that way my shoulder's not cut off by how weirdly I set it up. Don't worry, I'll light the green screen better next week. No one will know that my background is fake.
No one will know. This is not the man you were looking for. No one will know. This is not.
We're in the Matrix now. That's what's happening. Or this one, right?
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, just leave those. That's a little sidetrack. If you guys here, if you want, I can just tune it in like this, and we'll entertain
everyone.
People.
Will start losing their mind,
guys. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, you're missing out right now, right?
Goodness.
So one of the, like I said, to me, it comes back to a level of character, a level of respect, a level that there's such a mutual communication and trust with one another.
Yeah.
That it's not that she's supposed to be, the wife, is supposed to be a doormat. It doesn't mean she shouldn't have her own opinions. It doesn't mean that, I've got some notes here just to help keep myself on track, because otherwise I get all over the place. It is something where she's supposed to be supporting of her husband. But as you were saying, the very next, if you continue reading, right? Mm-hmm. If it's not, well, hey, honey, look at this. If you continue reading, what are the rules for the husband? So what is it that you're supposed to be doing? I'm going to flip the script on you now, because we got a lot of time on the show. And Kevin Campbell here says, hey, Robbie, good to see you. I'll give some shout outs here real quick. Always good to see you. Kevin Campbell says, I'll say without my wife's support, I'd be lost. If I didn't submit to her advice at times, he corrected, I would have made terrible decisions at times.
Well, and that's a good point right there. Like Kevin said, without my wife's support, and her being supporting is exactly what that verse just said. Like her lovingly encouraging and supporting him, holding him accountable too. Like that's what it means to submit to one another, because it's saying I'm going to put you before me. And let's not kid ourselves. Mike, you're married. I'm married.
Yeah.
I love my wife. There's never a time where it's like, oh, I got to bring up something that I know that you're not going to like. Like we never go, yes, I get to say, I think this is the wrong decision. So
you can, but that's not the preferred method.
Well, no, and having
like no matter
tough
what
dialogue. Yeah, but having those tough dialogues, it's much easier as a spouse to go, I'd rather not bring that up. I'm cool. I'd just rather not have that conversation. But if we're truly submitting, if we're truly submitting to Christ, if we truly love our spouse, if we're putting them first, which is really what submitting is, right? If we're putting them first, then we do things like what Kevin's wife did, which is give him support and advice that sometimes he may not have wanted that advice, but he needed it. And that is a way of submitting. He's submitting to her advice, right? He's being reverent to her, like it says. And she's submitting to him by putting him first and saying, you need to hear this. And that's the hard part is because we're so used to using the word submit in a way that it's not meant here, we have a very hard time with that word. So you said the next part, and you called me out on that, but I just felt so strongly I just want to bring that up.
No, but I think I want to stay on that for a minute because stay on it. Submitting it doesn't mean I started to say a minute ago. It does not mean that she's just going to be somebody to be walked all over. So it's I submit, and then the husband's always right. It doesn't work that way. It is a
does
very
at my
mutual.
House,
well, I mean,
actually. I'm sorry. I had to
the key. It doesn't mean there's not going to be any problems, and it doesn't mean that they're always going to be resolved in favor of either party. What it means is that they'll be resolved, for lack of a better word, harmoniously. They're going to be resolved with a mutual harmony and a mutual understanding because of that level of respect and love you have for one another. So respect. When we're talking about this, the woman, the wife, has such a respect for her husband that he knows that so deeply it helps to build up his self-confidence. And in building his self-confidence and he's able to be compassionate. He's able to then follow into the next verse, love his wife, right?
Yes. As what, Mike? But how is he supposed to love her? As what?
Love his wife as himself. I have this up.
Actually,
love his wife as he loves Christ.
Just as Christ loved the church.
And he gave up his life for her.
That's bingo.
To make her holy and clean, wash the cleansing of God's word. I did look this up. You were just calling me before I had it on the screen. Listen, I don't know the Bible perfectly. I know the one message that I always come back to in the Bible, and we've talked about this before, love and kindness. That's the one message. I just state like that's the straight as an arrow. So
God, people. That's how I remember too the cross, right? God, then this way.
People.
There's at the beginning of this the word reverence though, right? When it says in verse 21, and further submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. I want to grab the Greek word for reverence. We're gonna get nerdy. We're gonna get nerd on you now. So
Friday night fire, and we're going to teach you how to make it with flint and steel.
Oh, dude, I still think we need to play. Is it Danzig? Fire. Okay. But the Greek word, and I'm going to butcher it, is eulabia. I believe. I probably won't say it right. But let's see. The Greek word used for reverence. I just want to make sure I'm using the right Greek word, or the right version of reverence, and the one that's used in Ephesians. Because a lot of times when we translate words, we translate them a little bit wrong. So there's Eusebia and Eulabia. Okay, they both mean reverence. But here's the thing. When used, it means to reverently fear God. But when properly used, it means taking hold of what God calls good or holy caution. So when we look at this, like reverent caution says, and further submit to one another out of holy caution for Christ. Submit to one another out of what God calls good for Christ. This whole thing about submission is about trying to be more like Christ. And we make the mistake often of reading the Bible and trying to go, how does this fit me? Instead of going, how should this shape me?
Oh man, that's a good statement. Say that
Just
again.
came in my head. Hopefully I can. We read the Bible often saying, how does this fit me? Instead of how can this shape me?
That's so good.
Thank you. I'm done. Camera off. Game over.
Wait, no. I think a lot of people do that is they read the Bible and they try and make it fit them. And I'm just as guilty. I do my Monday morning podcast. And as we go through that, as I go through the Monday morning podcast, I'm going, well, how's the Bible speaking to me in this moment? Versus like exactly what you said, how can it shape me for this moment? And to be able to share and be able to speak to others or allow him to speak through me to others. That's something that's so valuable. Absolutely, Matt.
Dude, it's hard. I mean, let's be honest on this show. It's hard, right? The idea of always putting somebody before yourself, because biblically we are literally called to put everyone before ourselves. And that doesn't sound like a really fun life choice, if I'm being honest. It sounds like, I mean, if I'm being honest, dude, it sounds like one of those deals where it's like, but when's it my turn, right? Like, when does somebody do that for me? And this is where having the right person that God put in your life is so important. Because we can look back at, and I mean, out of respect for my spouse and myself and everyone else, we've all had prior relationships that definitely God wasn't the choice for making that relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
And I can say without question that I feel like God put Dara and I together for a reason. I was not really in the Bible. I believed in God, but I had walked away from really putting any time in the Word. And I can say before she and I were together, everybody that I looked for, it was like, how is this person going to fit in my life? And make, because if they're going to make my life harder, it ain't worth it. That's just, I don't want somebody who's going to be needy and need me to this and that. And that was a very selfish perspective, but I'm just being honest, right? I mean, I feel like, let's be on the show, let's be honest. Absolutely. So I was always looking for how will this benefit me? And in our marriage, I never feel like I got to go, what's in it for me? Because I feel like she's constantly trying to make my life better. And so it's easy to have that constant desire to go, how can I make her life better? And that's this whole section of Ephesians is talking about relationship. And this section from 21 all the way through verse 32 is all about the husband-wife relationship. And if people don't grasp the part that it was never about what's in it for me. When you meet your spouse and you say, I'm yours, you're mine forever. This is the deal we're in. Then the rest of your life, you both, can you imagine those of you that are single or your relationship struggling or whatever, could you imagine what it would be like if both of you just lived to try and make the other person's life better? My man Seth Drake, love you, bro. So good to see you on here. But imagine that in a marriage. Not I'm trying to fix my wife and get her more like Jesus because I'm stronger in my walk. Or my wife's trying to fix me because she's more like Jesus and she's stronger in her walk. No, what would a relationship look like if I went, like Jesus loved me, like Jesus went to the cross, like Jesus laid down his life. Nothing was more important than him making sure I was reconciled with God so that my life could actually be the best one that God had planned for me. Imagine if that's how I lived toward my wife and my wife lived like that toward me. Imagine how much different your relationship would be if you both did that. You never have a need where you went, oh, it's my turn. Or, oh, boy, we're going to get real for those of you watching.
Real.
Like, it's my, oh, I want to be sexually satisfied. Oh, I feel like I never am, right? And a wife's not going to feel like, oh, my God, he just wants to, like, have sex and then he doesn't care about, me and my pleasure in this relationship. None of that would ever happen because both people would be trying so hard to please each other and make the other person feel loved. And it goes beyond just your everyday feelings and, I'm going to make coffee and, I'm going to take out the trash. And it goes all the way to your bedroom. That's a gift from God. That's
Absolutely.
a gift from God.
Well,
it's a big deal.
As you're bringing it up, and I want to address what you said a couple minutes ago, because I think this is a valuable discussion to have. I don't think enough guys have a real discussion about something like this, about taking care of that piece of the relationship, the sexual piece of the relationship. And yeah, that's a hard conversation, especially it's a hard conversation that you're going to bring me into tonight. And we're going to do it.
Love you, bro.
Hey, but here's the thing. I'm thinking back and you're talking about past relationships, and it's like just that little tweak in the way that we speak to ourselves, the way that we speak to others and such. I've been the same guy. Like, hey, what's in it for me? How can I find it? Here's a simple statement. We're out there looking. If you're a single person watching this and you're looking for somebody right now to make your life whole, you say, well, I feel, it's like shopping, right? You realize you have a need. Now you got to go out and you got to find somebody to fill that need. And you're going, well, who can fill this need for me? Because it's my turn, using your terminology, Matt. Instead, just shift it and say, how can I fill this need for someone else? How can I find these? Listen, these are the non-negotiables. These are the things that I have to have in a spouse or a partner. And then how can I fill those needs for another person? And if you start to shift that and look at it in that way, suddenly, and that goes for anything, not just personal relationships. I think that happens in business relationships. It happens all kinds of other places. And not to get way off track, when you do that in business, hey, how can I fill this? How can I fill this need in business? How can I provide this solution for this business owner, this manager, this person? All of a sudden, doors just start to open for you, and you don't realize what's that.
That sounds crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy. It's so crazy, right? Knock and it will be open to you, right? And part of that is because you start truly living for the purpose that God gave you, for the other person, for the business. You start living in your purpose. You start. I don't even have a good word for it. You start glowing because of those things that He provided to you. You start vibrating, right?
Radiant.
It's radiant, right? I remember listening to Shaka Dyson speak. 4 or 5 years ago. And I remember him getting on stage. You've heard Shaka speak, right?
Not in person, but I've seen him online.
I've seen him in person. The guy's absolutely phenomenal. And I remember the first time I saw him speak, and he was talking about his energy and how he was vibrating. And he was just in his purpose, in his moment. And he was up there not for himself, not to bring attention to himself, but to serve other people in providing the knowledge that he had.
Nice.
And so it's the same sort of deal, I think, as we get into that personal sort of relationship with anybody,
I would agree.
That when you're truly providing, you're there just to heal that piece of them. You're there to provide that piece of them. You're there to submit to that other person. Then there's just something magical that happens. There really is.
And you at what you just said about what Shaka did and when he was speaking, and when you think about it, like this just goes back to like And further, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, or as the Message paraphrase, out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent to one another. This is the crazy thing is when we talked about the non-negotiables in a relationship, right? One of the things my wife and I, one of the non-negotiables was our faith being the same, right? Believing
Absolutely.
Christ is, Jesus is who he said he was. He's the way to God. And I'll leave it at that because that's a whole nother show to dig into deeper theology. Sure. But at the core, that had to be on point for both of us, even though I wasn't walking in the Word. I really wasn't. That was still important because I couldn't be tied to somebody who at the core had a completely different view of their purpose here and eternity, right? Like even though I wasn't living it inside, I knew that, right? And here's the crazy thing that I never understood, that never made sense until my marriage now to my amazing wife. For husbands, verse 25, this means love your wives just as Christ loved the church. He gave up his life for her. Boom. Right there. He gave up his life for her to make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of God's word. He did this to present her to himself as a glorious church without a spot or wrinkle or any other blemish. Instead, she will be holy and without fault. In the same way, husbands, that was explaining what Jesus did. For those of you like, so I washed my wife in the Bible, that are like not getting what that means. That was like talking about what Jesus did for us, the church. And by the way, you're the church. Whether you know it or not, you are. Jesus doesn't say for God so loved the Christians or for God so loved the Jews. It says for God so loved the world.
God so loved the world.
If you're tuning in and you're like, I don't believe in this stuff. Well, you know what? You don't have to believe in, well, you should. But just because you don't believe in it doesn't mean Jesus didn't die for you too. Just so you know. But verse 20, I just had to go off a mini sermon. But verse 28, in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. So in the same way, what did Jesus do? Laid his life down. What are we to do it? We're supposed to do it in the same way. And it says, for a man who loves his wife actually shows love for himself. So if you're not being loving to your wife, you're also dishonoring yourself. If you're not showing love to her, if you're not holding her up as this beautiful, wonderful woman that was a gift to you, if you're disrespecting that, you're disrespecting yourself. You are not honoring yourself. And it says, no one hates his own body, but feeds and cares for it, just like Christ cares for the church. And we are members of his body. As the scriptures say, this one is so great. Great.
So great. There we go.
Bring
it.
This
Bring
part,
it, Jesus, Matt Koenig.
Great. It says, as the scriptures say, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united as one. That referencing, by the way, that's what comedians call a callback. It's a callback to Genesis 2:24. But I want to share with you the Message version. Husbands, go all out in your love for your wives exactly as Christ did for the church. A love marked by giving, not getting. Giving, not getting. Love that. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke her beauty. Everything he does and says is designed to bring the best out of her, dressing her in dazzling white silk, radiant holiness. That's how husbands ought to love their wives. This is such a cool paraphrase here. They're really doing themselves a favor since they're already one in marriage. They're really doing themselves a favor because they're already one in marriage. Two became one. Everything you do, every way you represent your wife. When people go and they trash talk their wife, right? Like they're like, oh, happy wife, happy life. Oh, my wife this, but I put up with it. You're making yourself look like a turd. When you dog your wife, when you dog your husband, ladies, when you're off trash talking them, I don't care if your friends giggle and smile and laugh and go along with it. Inside, what they're realizing is, man, you are how disrespectful. And whether you realize it or not, that's how it makes us look. When we do that, we're just making ourselves look like what we're like a disrespectful, horrible person. The bad mouthing that we're doing is what is just it's who we are.
I said this in a again, in an online discussion just the other night, we think, humans think that, well, I'm gonna throw this out there. Like, what's the motive? What is the motive?
Boom.
In most cases, the motive is because you think by knocking down this other person that cares for and nurtures me and has helped build our relationship and build our life, by knocking them down, it's going to bring me up a couple of notches. Guess what? You're getting knocked on your ass with them. If you're doing it, you're kicking the chair out from underneath them. I promise you, you're sliding out and you're falling, and you're going to end up flat on your back. Whether somebody now, and again, keeping in mind that those people that you're trying to entertain, those people that you're trying to impress with your wit and your dazzling, whatever it is that we want to call it, they are not going, in most cases, to bring that to your attention. They're not the judge. They're not the
and they
one
don't
saying
care.
Yeah,
I mean, to be fair,
like
why would they care about, like, oh boy, you sound kind of like a dick the way you're talking about your wife, so I'm gonna let you know. Why would they want to engage in an verbal altercation with you?
Yeah, and if that's how you're presenting it, just keep that in mind. Also, it's like you are never going to build yourself up in any situation. We're primarily, as Matt and I are delving into this, and we're having this throughout this whole conversation. We're talking husbands and wives primarily, but in business relationships, in brotherhoods, if behind somebody's back you're trash talking somebody else in any sort of relationship, I promise you think you're doing it, and in the moment, oh man, this makes me look good. Watch this. It never does.
So true. I love what Seth Drake said. The two became one. You rise together.
And you fall together.
That's solid, man. I mean, you really do. I think we take marriage so lightly now.
Oh yeah.
World, we just, it's not. And oh man, I am so guilty of saying this for so many years. It's just a piece of paper. Now I'm saying this. It's not just.
It is not.
You know what? You know when it's just a piece of paper? When you actually don't love the person and plan on giving your life for the person you're marrying. That's when to you it's just a piece of paper, and when you should never have gotten married in the first place. And this, I love that the Bible acknowledges this, though, because even as people who believe in Jesus, even as two people who know they married the best human being in the whole wide world that God put before them, I love that the scripture says this in verse 32. This is a great mystery. And the Message says it like this. This is a huge mystery, and I don't pretend to understand it all. That's the honest part is, in the world, even as Christ followers, this whole be the servant thing to everybody, it's easy to say, I get it, because I get it, but it's really hard to really get it. It is a mystery. Why God said, I'm gonna create this world for you and give you the opportunity to do everything but eat from this one stupid tree. And by the way, the thing I really want you to do is not at all care about yourself and care about everybody else. All right, love you guys.
Peace out. Yeah.
Wait, what? You just gave me the whole world as a playground, but I'm not supposed to care about playing? That's not supposed to be my focus? My focus is supposed to be about helping somebody else be happy in the playground? Like what? It is the great mystery. This mystery of finding that perfect person. Oh, dude, this just so hit me. It is a great mystery about how there is that person for you that finally you will meet, and all of a sudden it clicks where you go, it's never been about me.
That is a powerful statement, because you do have a realization at some point. I think many people do, that says, man, it's never been about me. So Kevin Campbell said it takes true love to find these actions and merits. What we're talking about. Absolutely. True love for someone else, true love for Christ, true love then for yourself. I think there's that could be a whole nother show in itself. That there are different definitions of true love, right? That
just the word love has multiple definitions.
Absolutely. I want to pick up on something you said a minute ago, because you were talking about it's just a piece of paper, and I have an opinion on this. Hey, congratulations on 15 years. Kevin Campbell says 15 years strong with Kelly.
Congrats, bro.
That's cool, man. That's good. Brooke and I are coming up on 15 years next June. So
Jared and I are coming up on 2 months on the 28th.
Weird. Hey, it's not about the time, it's what you put into it, man.
That's right.
So
I was about to make a manhood joke to follow that up, but I'm gonna not right now.
So one of the things when we talk about just a piece of paper, or people not having the same level of reverence right now today in society in 2020 as they did even in 1920. And it's an interesting perspective. I think one of the things that has created chaos is the advent of the internet and the ability for so many people to share so many opinions on what they believe love is, on what they believe the Bible is, on what their belief of right or wrong or whatever. And I want to say I read a blog post at one point that was talking about, they said, well, so why is that? Like, why is it that now, fast forward in current modern day society, like especially in the United States, that divorce is so rampant? And like I said, I can't quote this specifically, Matt, so I don't want it to be like taken way out of context, but someone had interviewed
perfectly
their grandfather or great grandfather, and they said, well, what and they're interviewing an older person, different generational person. They said, well, what was the difference between now? Yeah, thank you, Kevin. He says, y'all are both amazing men. Appreciate that. So the question was, okay, well, so why now do we have more broken marriages? Why now do we have more divorce? Why now is it so easy to remove that in society? And previously, and again, interviewing an older gentleman, previously that was not something. Like you seem to have, in older generations, my grandfather's generation, my grandparents were married for 50 plus years.
Yeah, dude.
And there's two different perspectives. I read this, that they said, well, it's because women had to submit in the negative connotation to their husbands. They didn't speak up as much and so forth. And this older gentleman responded, and he says, well, yeah, that could be. He says, but right now in society, you guys have things like Amazon. So when something breaks, you get a new one in 2 days. He says, in my day, when something broke, we took the time to fix it. And we did the same thing with our marriage.
Ooh, come on now.
I was like, dang, dude, drop the mic on that, right? It's like, okay, so these days, if your marriage is broken, what do? Oh, man, you can go on and you can order a new wife. You can connect with someone on social media. It's that easy, right?
Get on Tinder.
But, or you could invest
Ashley
the time to actually work on it and fix it. And so I thought that was a really impactful statement for me. That was an impactful share.
What you just said, literally, though, just shows how much we've devolved, right? And I'll say that because
in some ways, yeah.
Literally, there are, and it was big in the news a couple of years ago, but the divorce rate, the adultery rate is so high. Like there are sites. Ashley Madison was in the news for a long time. It's specifically a site for people to cheat on their spouse. That is literally what it was created for. And that is pretty crushing and heartbreaking, right? But I want to.
Well, what are you missing? What is so bad? I'm sorry to interrupt here, but like when you say that, that's one of those things that it's like, my gosh, what is so bad that you've got to go out instead of working on what you've got and just try and find something for the moment? Like that
It's the new classified ads. Like that old song that's so fun to sing. If you like pina coladas, right? You listen to that whole song. What is the whole song about? There's two
getting
people
caught in the rain.
Yeah, but they're unhappy in their marriage, or so they think. And now I'm going to take this from scripture to a one-hit wonder. but it's going to all tie back together. Okay. And here's the thing in that song, it's a couple who believes they're unhappy with their spouse, right? So that it's like
they like different things.
Take out a classified ad, right? Because they're like, oh, they're unhappy. And I'm actually gonna pull up the lyrics just like I did with scripture, because they're actually really powerful. It says, "I was feeling the blues." Oh no, wrong. That's Garth Brooks' song.
I like Garth Brooks too.
Also good. Hold on. Because the lyrics are actually really powerful. Escape. Thank you. Escape song lyrics. That's what I needed to pull up. The Pina Colada song.
Oh, that's good. Okay, while he's looking that up, I'm going to cover this, what Kevin shared, because he said, Pastor Furtick, Stephen Furtick, said this week spoke about the power of the tongue. His wife Holly then said in 2020, you have to be careful of the power of the thumbs.
Oh, that is strong.
Scrolling, right?
So
and looking and shopping, and it's terrible.
I did find the Rupert Holmes song, and here's how this song starts. And it's sad because we were just celebrating how long you and Brooke and Kevin and Kelly, I believe, right? How long they've been married. And this song, which is from like the 70s, 80s, says, I was tired of my lady. We've been married too long. Like a worn-out recording of her favorite song. Here's the interesting part. Not a worn-out recording of a crap song. A worn-out recording of our favorite song. Meaning, I think this person that I found was perfect and everything's great. It's gone on too long, right? So while she lay there sleeping, I read the paper in bed, and in the personal columns, there was this letter I read. If you like pina coladas getting caught in the rain, if you're not in yoga, you have half a brain. If you like making love at midnight, the dunes in the Cape, then I'm the love that you've looked for. Write to me and escape. So he reads this thing that sounds like the perfect woman, right?
He's like, hey, I like all those things. I like
pina coladas. And notice what's all in there, though. If you like having fun together with someone, if you like doing silly stuff like dancing in the rain, if you don't like doing this one little yoga deal, if you don't have to be the smartest person, but if you got a half a brain, so you at least got common sense. If you like making love at midnight, like everything described in here is if you just like connecting with a person all the way in something deep and intimate, I might be the right one for you. And then he says, I didn't think about my lady. I know it sounds kind of mean. Like he literally goes right into that, right? And then and it goes, but me and my old lady had fallen into the same old dull routine. You know what's the funny part is, though, they could have been in the same routine like in Pina Coladas Dance in the Rain. So he writes and he basically says,
and the reality is that's probably where they started in the relationship. They probably like those things. They started out that first year, 2 years, 3 years, and then all of a sudden the dancing stopped, the pina coladas stopped. Instead,
the making love at midnight stopped.
Yeah.
People don't realize that. Like, you get tired from work, you do all this stuff, and then the intimacy goes away, and that's a relationship murderer. It's a murderer of your relationship. And the funny thing is, that song ends, if you've ever listened to the whole thing, right? Because he's like, yes, I like pina coladas, and all this stuff. And the whole story is they find out, both of them. It says, so I waited with high hopes. She walked in the place. I knew her smile at an instant. The curve of her face. She said, oh, it's you. We laughed.
It was my own lovely lady.
Yeah, and then we laughed for a moment, and I said, I never knew. So you know what it really says? Going right back to the beginning of Ephesians, having this reverence for one another. You know what a great sign of reverence for somebody is? Talking to them and listening to them. Hey, what do you like? What do you want to try that we haven't done? Hey, like Dara said, hey, her daughter Kate and Kate's husband Nathan are coming to visit us here in a week and a half. And she had talked to Kate, and then she said to me, hey, babe, what do you think about driving up to some city that I don't know because I don't know Washington well? What do you think about just making a road trip with Kate and Nathan and going up and doing this? And I was like, that sounds great. See, we don't necessarily always like to do the same stuff. I love movies, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna get called on this. We literally just watched Twilight and New Moon yesterday, and we're watching Eclipse tonight. We're like binge watching the Twilight series because just because Dara's daughter Bella, who's 12, wants to. This one is the one that turned on Twilight yesterday because I'm a dork. I could watch sappy, cheesy, like romance or action movies and be happy all day. Dara loves to go explore places. I'm not very outdoorsy, those who know me, but I love doing that with her. And you know why? Because I love seeing the joy on her face when we do it. So all of a sudden, I love doing it.
Right.
And that silly Pina Colada song goes back to a kind of love that is referenced in Ephesians. And there was actually a purpose that I brought this up, Mike.
Here's where it brings it back for y'all.
This is where it goes back to the Bible. There's 6 Greek words for love. And they're eros, which is sexual passion, which is the making love in the rain part of the Pina Colada song. Philia, which is a deep friendship. Ludus, which is playful love. Agape, which is a love for everyone. Pragma, which is a long-standing love. And philautia, which is love of yourself. So in Ephesians, I just want to point out, when it says husbands love your wife, it isn't eros. It's not the sexual love that's used in that verse. It's actually the agape. Agapete actually is how you pronounce it, if you could read the Greek, which is crazy. But it's that kind of love. That love that is like, hey, love your wife like a servant love, a giving love. And then it continues on, right? So that's an important thing to understand, is that it is the love that is you're being called to in that is that it's all because of what Jesus did love. It is a love your wife, like in a serving love, in a put you first love, in a Jesus-like love. There's no room for selfishness in that love. That's pretty powerful when you look at what it means. That's strong. That's a strong word. Seth said you don't have to love what they love if you love their happiness as your own. Yes. And I learned that in this marriage. Like, I never knew that in all of my life until now.
That there is something also magical. God, Seth, I love that statement. You don't have to love what they love if you love their happiness as your own. There is something that is absolutely magical when you are able to see and experience someone else's joy. When you're able to experience someone else's joy, you're able to experience that sort of love and happiness through them. It's you can't even describe it. So with that, we're right at an hour for tonight. Sometimes time flies, man. We get going on this stuff. And I last time I looked at the clock, it was like 6:15, and now here. And now I look and I'm like, well, it's an hour. We promise the people that are watching, try and keep it to an hour on Friday night, because depending on where you're at in the world.
Plus, we're about to watch Eclipse. Wow.
Yeah, I don't.
I wasn't kidding. I was being serious.
I know.
Sparkly vampires are good, man. Listen, for all of you that want to see what true servant love looks like, you go watch Twilight. That is 2 pretend teenagers putting the other one first. Like, nobody would love a vampire, but it saved their life. Listen, in New Moon.
You didn't know. This is the bonus clip.
It is. It saved their lives from the Volturi when Edward was about to be killed. Shout out to Forks, Washington. We live in Monroe, but I do want to go see Forks, even though the movie was filmed in Oregon. Yeah, I'm that much of a nerd. But at the end of New Moon, spoiler alert, when the Volturi is about to kill Edward, got him by the throat, Belle's like, no, kill me, not him. That was about as dramatic as she did it. And the guy, the leader of the Volturi, Aro, stops and he's like, how interesting. You would give your life for one of us without a soul. Boom. Lay down your life. He was willing to. Just like Edward was willing to for her. True love. Twilight. Boom. That's example of in the Bible. And no, vampires are not like satanic. They're not even in the Bible. Unless you watch Dracula 2000, where not Russell Crowe, but Gerard Butler is actually Judas, and that's why Silver's the only thing that can kill him. But that's a whole nother episode.
I'm not even sure that's one of our episodes.
That is Dracula 2000. Also great to watch.
I couldn't even keep up with him on that. Oh, gosh. So For everybody that took the time to tune in with us and go through that journey tonight, thank you. I love the end of this. It's amazing, right? Oh my gosh. I'm offended for all the vampires out there.
Listen, it's a wholesome love story with sparkles. Come on.
Oh, here you go.
Sparkly. That's the best face ever.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for this.
Thank you, Matt, for this as well, and thank you for everybody who's taking the time with joining us on Friday nights. As I've said before, we're doing Friday Night Fire. We're going to be sharing this podcast for about an hour each Friday night starting at 5 Pacific, 6 Mountain. That makes it 8 Eastern. And we're on all the podcast platforms. If you prefer an audio version, we're on Google Play and Apple iTunes and where else? Amazon, whatever. We're on Audible and the Amazon stuff, Spotify, right? iHeart. We are live in 3 more weeks. They have a pretty large or a pretty lengthy vetting process. So we'd love for you to tune in with us. If you know someone else that would like to participate in this message and listen in on the message, if you're somebody that would has something you would like us to discuss on the show and get perspective on, shoot one of us a message, shoot us an email. We'd love to do that. And
absolutely.
With that, I think until next time, I'm gonna go ahead and take this out. Hey, make sure share the show.
Follow this guy. Motivation with Mike.
Yeah, I do mornings with Mike on Monday mornings. Matt does. Oh wait, I got this too. This is like a really lengthy. There it is. Matt's podcast. Anchor FM Rockstar.
You can just look up the Rockstar Unplugged podcast on Apple's podcast, Google, Spotify, iHeart, anywhere that podcasts live that don't suck. It's there, not sucking. I was just looking at pictures of my grandson, speaking of love, because now I'm old. This is Oliver Daniel. You can't see him very well on the camera, but he's cute, and I love him. Yeah. Oh, he's looking at everyone.
What's up, guys? All right, and with that, man, I'm going to take us out. So, again, thank you, everybody, who took the time to tune in and join us tonight. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday night. I hope you have a great weekend. Look forward to seeing you this upcoming week. God bless you all. And from Matt and I, we look forward to seeing you again next weekend. So we'll see you soon.